Well, let's get rolling if that works for everybody. Call the meeting to order. It's 6 o'clock. And the first item on the agenda is a check-in with the school board. Members are in attendance. Welcome back and thank you. So I can't quite remember who was calling what, but I think we were both kind of feeling like it was a good time to check in. And it sounded like there's a meeting, a pretty important meeting last week. No, what day is it today? Monday.
Yeah.
Last week.
Yes.
Last Wednesday. So I just wanted to kind of hear update and again, kind of what if anything we can do to facilitate, dialogue as you roll into the next phase of communication.
Yeah, thanks. And credit to Zach for realizing that developments since our last conversation with you all and had sort of forced us to retract the statement we made about our expectations around the possibility of another proposal, because that was our best information at the time. But I think since we realized with the progress of the district's configuration committee being what it was, that it is actually in fact fairly realistic that we would have a vote in this school year, if not calendar year. And so yeah, agreed. It seemed like there was an opportunity to reconnect and update you all. Yes, so I guess, yeah, I mean, just to update you on the timeline, the district appointed a configuration committee, which included community members from every town in the district, along with a board representative from every town in the district, and I was the board representative from Calais. And that configuration committee, which was sort of like the second year we had a configuration committee, met from January until October. We haven't disbanded, or we haven't met since. And in those meetings, what we did was we examined basically how to tie the language of our core beliefs in our strategic plan to our instructional goals and the strategies, and basically the strategies to affect those instructional goals. And so with basically the philosophy being that we would let program and our programmatic needs determine the most sensible structure for the district. And we examined class size, we examined transportation, we examined co-curriculars, we examined sort of ed quality standards, district quality standards, equity standards. We examined the middle school model as it is now, where it falls short, what other middle school models might be out there. And so then in October, chose to adopt an administration drafted proposal, which basically brings us to exactly where we were a year ago, albeit in a very different way.
Yeah.
So now what happens next? The configuration committee doesn't have a lot of power in itself. So they advanced a recommended model to the full board, and now the full board, it's the responsibility of the full board to take it up. These two folks were not in the configuration committee, they are in the full board. Sort of the last action the configuration committee took was to host these listening sessions. So it was not an action of the board, to be clear, it was an action of the configuration committees to get feedback early in this process from towns on what their views were related to the proposal generally, and also if the proposal were to move forward, we wanted to understand how to make it, the most beneficial proposal it could be, most beneficial new configuration it could be, how to facilitate and streamline the process, especially for students and faculty. So we held those meetings in every town. Got a lot of feedback. I'd say generally the feedback in Calais was negative towards the proposal. We had constructive feedback coming from both directions. And that information is all going to be reported back to the full board. And then it's the full board to sort of set, it's their responsibility to set new timelines and a new plan. So those are the facts. But I
Can I
don't
think
know,
that's a clarifying question?
Sure.
You said the feedback was negative in Calais at these meetings. For
At
the
the
folks who
one in Calais.
were there,
yeah, so we had a meeting in each town.
right, and how many, I'm just curious how many folks were.
Yeah, we probably had what, 30, Michelle? 35, 40?
No, I don't think we had 40, but I think we had at least 30.
Somewhere around 30, yeah. We're gonna have a virtual session on this Thursday,
Mhm.
so for those who missed. The in-person session in their town, they can come to the virtual session, and we also are. Have posted, I think, a survey version
Yeah.
of our questions, so that's available for people to answer. If they wish to do it in that fashion.
Thank you.
Posted where?
Posted on Front Porch Forum, I believe.
Yeah,
Is it not yet?
yes, it has, and it's been on Facebook. It's been on Facebook, I know it's been circulating, and a lot of
Yeah,
people
I
are
think
sharing.
Elizabeth Brown might have posted it tonight on Front Porch Forum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Check my email.
I will double check that when I get home. So, yeah, I think the timeline is very tricky, honestly, because there are a lot of considerations, but just speaking for myself, it feels like the most important timeline is a very thoughtful and intentional transitional plan, that gives students and these school communities enough time to get comfortable, and not even just comfortable, but excited around about the mergers. And so in order to do that, you probably have a minimum of probably 5 months, which would be like a town meeting day vote. And if it passed, a reopening of the schools in the fall. But potentially as long as like a 16-month transition, where it would be voted on in town meeting day, and if it passed, it wouldn't go into effect until the year following the upcoming year. I think a lot of people's concerns still center around, what we had for concerns last time around, which is the lack of detail from the administration about what specifically the new configuration looks like. And, probably if you were to ask each of us in a closed room, our best guess about what that would look like, you would get 3 different answers, which I think speaks to the fact that we haven't really gotten into those details in open session with the administration. So that's work to be done for sure, and voters absolutely deserve like a clear description of what they get if they're supporting the closure of a facility. And to be clear, the 2 facilities supposed to be closed are Calais and Worcester. You guys want to weigh in or?
I think sort of the one thing I would want to add, and I was at the East Montpelier listening session last week, and this was actually very well received, and the idea that we're not talking about an absorption of one school by another. It's really looking at how do we create a new school for the 2 towns. So thinking about things like renaming, thinking about things like, how do we look at traditions and figure out what do we take from the two existing schools so that there aren't those, those elements, and I think that piece was dealt with well last time around. I think there were board members thinking it, but it was never really, this was part of the plan.
Right, that was the big thing is, that I heard, because I got to only listen, well, got to run the meeting. Is how to build a new sense of community, right? Is how to build a new sense of community in this new school, for everyone, and not just even parents, but there are community members within our own towns go and help out at the schools and things like that. How to make sure that those types of things are also being addressed.
So early on in last year's conversation, there were still some. Well, I think that like those closures were the ones that were most likely considered. There was still some flexibility, or not flexibility, but some undetermineds around what other kind of what other elements of the configuration and school mergers we're going to shake out. And is there a sense that is still the case, or is there pretty clear consensus around, or directive, I guess, around what that merger or consolidation is gonna look like for each of the facilities?
Are you asking about?
I guess there was some like the Berlin Elementary School having to make decisions around how that school could potentially be used.
Yeah. An early model that was looked before was potentially like an early childhood center,
Yeah.
center at Berlin. That was ruled out primarily because of the transportation challenges of bringing all early learners to a single location in the district, and I think it's primarily geography driven why the schools that were chosen because and due to facility size also. Berlin is one of the two largest schools in the district and is also farthest from all the others.
Right.
And then the next two largest schools in terms of their facility square footage are Rumney and East Montpelier. So that's why they were chosen.
And for the facilities themselves, like Calais and Doty, is there still dialogue around those assets being sold to the town for a particular amount, or?
Yeah, that seems, I mean, that's definitely still an available opportunity. I think.
Well, we don't actually have a choice on that. The law says.
Oh, okay.
The first thing that happens is we offer it to you for $1.
I see.
No, and that's already happened in the town of Calais, so, back during Act 46 merger. It was already determined that if Calais was not used as an educational facility, it automatically goes back to the town. It was
Okay.
like a $10
Yeah.
agreement, it's already been, so
No, okay.
that would happen.
Yeah, I guess what feels different based on conversations I've had this year is that it feels like if, that there's more interest in the district collaborating with towns on the reuse of the buildings. Which, doesn't change what we're legally obligated to do, but it opens the door for sort of more of like a partnership in reuse if there was interest.
Mhm.
But again, that's hearsay, that's conversation. There's no actual specific language in our meetings because I think it's worth emphasizing the board itself has had very little interaction with this plan to date. They've had reports out from the configuration committee, but it's been sort of sharing of information, not actual questions posed to the full board. So a lot of those conversations are still to have.
Do the other board members have questions? Or clarifications?
Well, that just left me, I'm sorry, I'm scratching my head a little bit
Yeah.
about what you just said there. In terms of where we are in the process, you're saying the configuration committee's reported out and now spoken with each, or opportunities for public engagement is happening. And that is all gonna be consolidated and reported back to the school board. And then the school board has an opportunity to get into then there'll be a discussion, at which time the public will again have the opportunity to engage, okay?
Yeah.
Just to clarify, the way the bylaws are written, if the school board has the power to close a building,
Right.
Yeah.
but the town in which it resides, can veto that decision basically and say, no, we don't want our school closed.
The public the voters have it.
The voters
Yeah,
of
right,
that
yes,
town.
yeah, understood, thank you.
The school board only is gonna be, only thing we can do is if we agree, is we bring it to the voters of Calais and the voters of Doty. We aren't deciding to close, we're giving it to the town to have that opportunity to decide for themselves.
Mhm.
Do you know what happens if one town votes one way and the other town votes the other way? Just logistically?
We don't, I think we would have to decide at that moment
Yeah.
whether to move forward with,
With closing one?
yeah. I mean, they're two distinct actions in some ways, but, I think another important thing that I didn't emphasize in my initial update is that the plan to basically close, the elementary schools and reopen 3 of them also includes the 6th grade moving up to the middle school as like a sort of an inseparable piece of that. The concern with just moving the 6th grade up to the middle school, even for me to the middle school, would be that, you would decrease the elementary school sizes to a rather vulnerable size. When you consider some of the mandates and rules of Act 73, so we do view them as sort of like a package deal, I guess, at this point. But whether one town supporting this and one town not, kills the plan completely or not, I don't think that's been decided. That has not been said.
So I guess on a little more clarification around the continued effort to like solicit and collect feedback, I guess, from the community with like the next virtual meeting and then survey. How is that feedback then useful to the board and whatever its next decision is, which sounds like a decision to put it up either for a vote for this town meeting or a standalone vote, or punt it to another election cycle?
Yeah, I mean, any answer to that would feel like speculation, but I guess. In my view, like. The more information, the better, and
Yeah.
the board really does have to make a decision both about timeline and about how much detail they need to see from the administration. Before they support or reject the proposal, and I don't think there's consensus on either of those topics yet. Because we haven't taken it up as a group. So I think the feedback from the towns will be helpful. Some of those concerns feel as if they could be mitigated with the right timeline and the right detail in a transition plan. Some are sort of more dogmatic and rigid, and it's just sort of clear opposition or clear support.
Yeah, I think there are really sort of 2 components. One is just do we move ahead with it or not? And clearly that's what the board would take feedback on. The second is, if we were to move forward with it, how do we do it? sort of what sorts of things do we want to preserve, what sorts of things would make the transition easier? Those kinds of components. And so I think both of those are useful.
I seem to remember last year that one of the questions that came up a lot was around budgetary impacts and not really having a good sense. I'm wondering if there's more information this year about like what next year's school budget look like without closing
Yeah.
schools versus with closing schools.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say there's less information to date, and that was intentional, like the configuration committee chose a path that de-emphasized the basically the financial efficiency of the plan. We didn't want to do this on the basis of financial efficiency, or on financial efficiency alone, so we chose to, to look at student outcomes and the benefits to students. In terms of this budget, though, obviously, it's important and it's important to voters, and we have to figure out what it looks like. If the transition were to happen next school year, then that obviously affects the budget. And so the plan would be to basically develop it would be a parallel budget process where you develop two budget scenarios. And that's something the administration is prepared to do if the board wants to move forward quickly. But you would have to, if it was gonna affect next year, you would have to pick a path. The board at least would have to pick a path by January, whatever, the day you have to warn.
Right.
Cause if the vote were at town meeting, that's when the budget's voted on as well, it would have to be
Yeah.
partnered.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a primary motive behind my question, was just like the logistics of trying to work any of that information into coordinating the warning and
Yeah,
and getting ahead of that. I feel like we're running out of time for our own warning preparations and town report and that sort of thing. So that would obviously be separate for you guys, but it does seem like it puts a pretty tight timeline on things.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, I will say the one advantage of sort of having it be right in line with the budget season is that when you're literally preparing two budgets side by side, it makes it much clearer what you're talking about in finance. You're not talking about, oh, this study said this or that study said that. You've got budget A and budget B, and so you can see them.
I think that's a good point. I think it's more interesting to consider what the financial impact is over the longer term. Obviously, during the transition, there's gonna be extra expenses and any savings will be probably offsetting these, but. One thing I would say that, a select board interest is if it does come to pass that the Calais schools offered to the town for $1. That's gonna be one of the bigger strategic decisions that the select board has faced in quite some time, so just thinking about like a 5-month or a 13-month decision, it might be beneficial for the town to have a little more time and thinking through what it wants to do.
Yeah, and I guess to the extent that we're looking that closely at budgets, I know we kind of raised this point the last time when we were hypothetically talking through this as we're preparing to, I guess, have a conversation around that. It's like, what are some of the facility costs just for operation, or just keeping the lights on, heating, like any kind of line of sight that we can have on what the carrying costs would be associated with operating or maintaining the building, would be helpful. Sooner than later. That wouldn't come into play until next year's budgeting process, but still, and the sooner we know any of that information, the better. So if there's an opportunity to, I guess, kind of like find a way to organize those costs in that fashion, that would be that would definitely be beneficial.
One thing I would say that we dealt with, the question that we dealt with the fact that when we were considering renting part of Doty to Turtle Island, that I think is worth that for you to consider. And I can switch hats if I need to, because there's a town planning, piece here as well, is that a question came up of, was what we were planning to doing with having a paying tenant close enough to our mission to still work with our tax exemption? And in that case, we were really expanding education down into lower grades. It's a pretty close nexus. Whereas nonprofits that have basically used their space as, oh, here's a revenue source, have gotten into trouble. And so there are certainly things you may want to be thinking that, recognizing these issues, like the issues in the enrollment aren't going away. Whether it's with this school board or a future school board under whatever's gonna happen with the state process. It's probably worth thinking about, how to deal with that in your town plan as well, since I know you're working on the town plan. Cause that, like, I'm also the former chair of the East Montpelier Planning Commission, and I can move seats if you wanna take the audience. But there are ways that could help with that planning process, to really help the town as well.
Yeah, Tegan,
So no, in the contract we have with the school district, we have a year to make a decision once it comes up.
yeah, it sounds
Time to like,
perfect, thank you.
I just would comment that, I hope you have heard this, so far, but I do think that, the starting point that the committee took the commission took is very much a valuable place to start, and I really appreciate that tack of coming at it from what's best for the students and for education of our students, and that means a whole lot, and I think sort of centering that is really valuable, and it's difficult given the comments that come immediately. They're trying to close our school. When you are looking at the data is very clear. And your analysis, I think the presentation is very strong. So I just wanted to pass back some positivity there. For a very difficult task. I don't envy it.
It is a challenge. I guess one last thing to mention is if after this evening you process further and have questions or concerns, like we really are quite serious about getting as much constructive feedback, positive and negative, about this as possible. And I think both the clearest description of what trying to maintain services that we have now might look like in the future, and the clearest description of what a reconfiguration of the elementary schools looks like is going to serve everyone, because you're going to be able to fairly judge the two if asked to. So we want that clarity out there, and feedback's really helpful. And yeah, if there's any, we've certainly dealt with the capital budgeting around the building, as Zach and I are both on finance committee for the board, but to the degree that we can help you get the district leadership to parse out the expenses related to the building in future conversations, we're happy to help advocate for the town if you need that information in the course of your decision making.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just gonna say that we need to be thinking about what. If the only line of communication is with the school board, or if we should be also making some requests directly to the administration, if we're not getting what's needed.
I'm all for you, but please copy us so that.
I'm just saying that
reinforce what you were
the
asking.
school board can only has so much purview.
Yeah.
And the administration needs to hear from parties involved, impacted.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the update and for the time. And thanks for the work. I know it's hard. I know certainly from my perspective, it's it's easy to get distracted by the emotions of the whole thing, and sometimes processing that part distracts from trying to lay out what the options are and what it actually looks like, which is the only reason I'm kind of leaning on like the budgetary and facility stuff. I'm not trying to presume anything,
Right.
but I think for a community, it helps, understand what those potentialities are. If there's some time spent just imagining what the future is instead of trying to fixate so much on what the present is and what the emotions in the present are. Because the data is not changing fast enough, frankly. But we can use our imagination hats a little bit better, I think, as a community. So thank you, everyone, and then certainly let us know if there's a way that we can participate in the communication that helps encourage engagement in a constructive way. Happy to do it as best we can. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Daniel, you're not allowed to go anywhere. We're gonna roll right into the rest of fiscal budgeting.
On to weighty matter, like porta potties.
Yeah, so we're gonna pivot then to next agenda block, which is continued committee check-in on the fiscal year 2027 kind of budgeting requests and process. So tonight we have swim committee, conservation and cemetery commissions. It looks like we've got everybody for that. So we'll start with the swim committee. We've got the proposal for I guess we have the budget for FY 26 and trying to look for a little line of sight on what we should be allocating or
We're requesting a budget allocation of $2,500. A little confusing because we have about $1,100 in preseason expenses, which all land before this fiscal year is over. And then in the course of the summer, we have earned revenue from swimmer fees and hopefully a budget allocation that cover most of our in-season needs and also leave some money left over for next year's preseason. And I tried to show my math and I probably did it in a confusing way and I apologize for that, but it boils down to $2,500. And you may recall that you authorized us to borrow some money against our small endowment last year. Kari advised that was borrowed and it was also repaid, so that's all washed and laundered. And we'll go back to that sort of a pretty good situation where we have almost as much as we need to fill our preseason needs, and then that earned income in the budget request would cover the rest.
well, that's
How many students were there this year?
That's a great question. I think it was, we had fewer than we expected, and we budgeted 72 swimmers. We projected 72 swimmers last year. I think it was in the high 50s though. It was pretty close to what we expected.
Yes.
well, it's half of what was allocated in 2026, so I think that is
Yeah, no
certainly
doubt.
helpful. Yeah,
No doubt.
no doubt this year. No big purchases planned for this next year.
No, I don't think so, because we have the floating dock done, we have the regular dock done. It's really just supplies and sort of our services budget related to the porta potty and the water tests and so on.
What does WSI stand for?
Water safety. We go a step above lifeguard
Mhm.
And, we actually, there's a higher age limit if it's in a non-pool situation to get a water safety instructor. You can get 15-year-olds, I think, licensed as water safety instructors if they're teaching in a pool. But they have to be at least 16 or 17 if they're teaching in a pool. Makes, finding instructors harder. So if you know anyone, I think we might have one, but we don't have the two we had last year.
Just quickly on the, you anticipate a lower preseason cost in 2027?
Yeah,
So you're only reserving 763, and that's what you imagine? Is it just that there's one-time costs and?
there was, yeah, so it's a little bit of a guessing game, but, there's more. We're setting aside more money for the water safety instructor certification this year. Those certifications are good for 2 years.
Okay,
So our rationale was that if we
uh-huh,
pay for 2 people this year, we might only have to pay for 1 person next year. And yeah, I adjusted our supplies budget down a little bit, and I understood from the instructors from last year that a lot of the supplies had to be replaced, will have to be replaced this off season,
mhm,
but that's not $250
an
more than we
okay.
usually have to do annually.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Happy to answer any questions by email if there are.
That comes up.
Thanks for your time.
Pretty straightforward, thank you. Next up is conservation, Daniel and company. How's it going?
Good.
So we have conservation fund analysis and Kari's memo, as well as the request from conservation in the share drive, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Do you want to run through that, Neil? Or anybody? Doesn't have to be Neil, but.
The big thing is we're asking for a significant increase to the conservation fund allocation. And the conservation fund is used for conservation projects in town. A lot of it is supporting conservation easements that happen in town, like the Armstrong Farm and Laguerre Farm, and the land up on Robinson Hill. And then also some other projects like Memorial Halls in there. But there's a lot of energy at the state level around conservation with Act 59, which is the trying to conserve 30% of Vermont's land by 2030. And there are organizations that have conservation funding, like the Housing Conservation Board and Vermont Land Trust. And a lot of times, they ask for a local match. So having money in our conservation fund gives us the ability to bring in the conservation money from these other organizations and kind of more proactively do conservation projects in town. And support landowners who would like to do that, but can't afford it right now. So with the kind of level of funding the conservation fund has had, we can do a project every now and then, kind of opportunistically, when something comes along, but, we already have a couple of projects coming up for this coming year, people who are interested in doing conservation easements, and we want to be in a position to take advantage of those and conserve areas that are important to us. So that's the big thing. The other change is an increase to the money that we contribute to the Lakes and Streams newsletter. So Lakes and Streams is not part of the Conservation Commission, but you probably all know the newsletter that they put out. And they've been kind of funding it themselves in large part the last few years, which is unsustainable because the mailing costs are pretty expensive and printing and stuff. So we're hoping that the town can keep that tradition going. It's a nice newsletter that comes out to every landowner, and they really value the kind of having a hard copy color newsletter that people can have, you know, put up in the bathroom and read when you're using the bathroom.
Thank you, Neil. I think on that one, there's some dialogue that we were having last week, a little bit about like the Lakes and Streams committee as a subcommittee and how it's organized, and just during our agenda planning meeting, which is generally Kari, Barbara Butler, myself, and Jamie and Tegan, and we were, as a group, kind of leaning towards, I think, it making sense to consider spinning that off as a standalone committee that then receives appointments from the select board, which you know is I guess a burden of work. But you know, the more we started thinking about how that committee functions, largely as a volunteer group of people with a particular focus, it's kind of similar to the Trails Committee, and maybe looking at trying to structure it in a very similar way. In that way, as they have particular budget requests like this one, instead of having to roll it up under conservation, and it might make sense just to allow them to do it themselves. They're already functioning largely as a standalone committee anyway.
Trails is.
Yeah, Trails is a standalone committee. I think, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that is, I think that's fine, consider that, and that would solve that particular line item question too in the future. And expect that we already have there's such a good interchange among these subcommittees as well as people who serve on multiple ones, and then there's no reason to think that those three groups, whether they're parts of each other or separate standing, will continue to work on similar priorities, because there's a lot of overlap there, but yeah, I don't think that would be an issue.
Sorry, point of order there. Isn't it already?
No, yes, Tegan was gonna dig into a little more homework, but
Someone came and gave a presentation to locals in Calais about protecting bodies of water, and so sort of an ad hoc committee started just to protect bodies of water, and they never officially became attached to the town. We do put their publications on the website, but we don't, at this point, or the select board at this point doesn't appoint members, they don't have a budget line item. And then we all kind of thought they were a subcommittee of conservation, but that's not actually a thing.
It's just
They're just very kind and supportive of one another, they're not officially linked.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There is a reserve fund called Lakes and Ponds that has $13 on it.
Because
That's for ponds, lakes and ponds, not lakes and streams.
it's because they worked with us to get grants for this newsletter back in the day. They used to get supportive grant money, and that was why the town was not accustomed to paying for it, and the committee is not accustomed to paying for it because it was a grant for many years. And the only way to get that grant was through the town, so it had to be processed through the municipality for them to get that money.
Thank you.
yeah, I guess with like the increase in funding, I mean, one of the areas that seems like there's still pretty stable funding, either at a federal and state level, is around water quality issues in particular. And so I think we would get into some tricky territory where, you know, we as the select board would need to be more involved in approving certain grants and funding of particular projects if those opportunities were coming along. So I don't know. I think I'm just signaling that, like, if there's some dialogue around whether that's in or out of the conservation committee's budget, I guess if we get organized fast enough around putting together a charter and defining the committee as a subcommittee of the select board, we could move that over to a different item.
Yeah, I think I hope it's all of us, and it's just like, you know, this is the right time for us to be getting excited about this.
Yeah.
You know, there is a lot of initiative happening at the state level, there is funding for resilience out there. There's still good, strong funding for conservation, and You know, our whole budget supports a lot more than just easements and, you know, the conservation fund work, and it looks outsized because those projects are really expensive, but there's a lot of goods that happen there that, you know, with three good, strong committees representing the municipality to be able to draw in funds from the state or from Northern Borders or wherever.
Yeah.
They increase what we do here. And when you look at the map over there of the UVA and conserved landscape in Calais, it's like a hugely strong value here. And now's the time to, like, you know, we think that having a strong conservation fund in the town supports what's essentially just a pure public good, which is having the community be involved in driving where those monies continue to get invested. And I think that those intersections of like forest and road infrastructure and streams and like, that's really expensive and really complicated work, but the better the community understands it, the more we can support it and bring more money to Alice, so. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. By the way, when I introduced myself to you last summer, I reminded you I was at the VHCB, and so that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, and one of the projects being able to do this has already been awarded funding by VHCB up at the fish farm, and I know there'll be a question coming to the select board about supporting that. So that's one that's already in the hopper, and coming, and I think there's another one that we think is pretty strongly being considered by the Vermont Land Trust, and they again would come.
But Northern Rivers.
Oh, by Northern Rivers, yeah, okay, yeah. So at least two that we know of that are, you know, if we can invest at the local level, we can really help to say what we want the vision for that to be.
By context, I just looked it up, the town was asked to contribute $8,500 last fall to the conservation easement for the Passage property. Remember that conversation? So they'll just give you a reference. I was gonna ask, did the commission talk about a long-term goal for the reserve for the conservation fund? Where do you wanna get to eventually?
I think that we're feeling it out a little bit because we want to be in a position to kind of be more proactive with conservation projects. And it's really driven by landowners and, you know, the work that happens is really driven by the interest. So we want to be in a place where we can support the people who want to be doing conservation projects, and then I think feel out how much there is there and where the kind of stable places.
But if you thought about local contribution asks coming in at between 8,500 and 20 grand, say that's what I see in my work, what between local donors as well as communities giving. You know, if we could do 2 or 3 projects a year, we'd be making really great progress in Calais on the goals that we have. In addition to supporting people being in current use and doing voluntary stewardship and all the other things that the commission, you know, tries to focus on. But I think that seems to me to be like, that would be a pretty good clip for one town to be pursuing is 2 or 3 projects a year. And of course, it depends on people being interested in it and, you know, our work at VHCD, we're trying to make it easier and less complicated and better for municipalities to do this without having so many different easement holders and so much complexity in the process. But that's still a couple of years out from being like getting going, I think.
If I can tag along to, I think just from my personal position on a couple of things, like with Kari and a couple of our reserve funds, we're really trying to bring a lot more, I guess, transparency onto like what the objectives are, and what our target balances are for those things. I think that help that can help in the communication to the taxpayers who are, you know, in my experience with like the contributions to the conservation funds in the last 3 years that I've been involved in those conversations is that, you know, there's a target annual amount and then there's some dialogue around whether we can afford it or not afford it, but there isn't like an end goal of how much we're trying to direct into that, and then, you know, what it gets used for. And there was, a pretty significant step back in that contribution. But then we've been climbing back to somewhere around like the $10,000 mark, I think is what I vaguely remember it being around when we started, and then we had to roll it back for a couple of years. I think, a bump up to 30 would be a lot for this year and kind of the economic environment and like conversations around affordability. But I think, again, another element from my personal perspective, what I think would really be beneficial would be to, and I think this is kind of playing out right now with the conversation with the planning commission as well, but like, what are the priority areas for conservation? Like, I think the Bassages property is like a good example of one that like ticked a lot of boxes. There's really important habitat, there's really important connectivity there. So like, as we're playing through the conservation versus incentivizing development or like strategic development in one area and conservation in another, I think it's really beneficial to have a plan, and maybe it doesn't have to be as rigid as like, these are the ones that we protect. But I do think that like that kind of transparency around like what the target conservation areas are for these 4 reasons, I think starts to inform how the DRB is evaluating, development in particular areas, or just how we're communicating with the landowners, because we have like this personal property element of it that is always going to be hard to game out in the long term. So have there been conversations around like trying to identify like higher priority conservation targets, aside from just kind of the overall 30%, 50% goals?
Yeah, where we are with that is like, we've been, working a lot with the planning commission on the town plan. And that, I think is a really valuable kind of framework for talking about this stuff, because we are having conversations about development with them, and not just in our little silo or conservation silo. And so the way I think about it is kind of out of those conversations, we're trying to draw a map with them about where do we prioritize development, where do we prioritize conservation, how do we do those things? And then on our list, and I think it waits until we've had some more of those conversations with the planning commission, but is redoing the conservation fund guidelines for the town, and that we have like a application form if someone wants to use money from the conservation fund. And that's where that intersects with like, how do we actually prioritize money getting spent on the conservation fund, where's it go?
So I think we're the exact same page in terms of wanting more transparency and like wanting the community to be involved and understand. So having a really, and last year, the commission, I just joined with the commission at town meeting, had all those maps that show the different layers of Vermont conservation design. So that was just one of the steps of sort of educating people about this from municipal officials and boards to everybody who comes to town meeting. And that's a prioritization matrix all by itself. So we have all that work with 16 different views of the town that show what are the highest priority waters, highest priority interior forest connectivity belts. And that's really, when we talk about what our priorities are, it's like conservation design says those, and then after that, it's like, well, how do you really protect around infrastructure and human use? So community forests, culverts and bridges, fisheries, those kinds of things that cost the town more money if you don't do them well, but are a benefit to the town if you do them right.
Yeah.
And we can look at the Association for Vermont Conservation Commission's site too, and just as we think about kind of how we're putting together the priorities for Calais, what their best practices are, and thinking what a fund that should be. I think, there are a lot of, about 80 towns in Vermont that have a conservation fund, and usually they're trying to keep them in the like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, but balance in there so that at any time the town could do one or two projects, but it really ranges from, like, there's a lot of differences in Vermont towns, so I don't think there's one way to do it.
Another plug, I guess, along those lines would be, just thinking about like the documentation. And so, like right now, we're kind of working through this like parallel process of like continuity planning. And just over the last few months, we've run into situations where we just have questions about like, oh, how did we come into possession of this town forest and why? And what was its intended use? Did we just grab it because somebody wasn't paying their taxes? But like, and who was involved in those conversations? So I think as you define kind of what the criteria are for requesting, but also I think defining like how you're going to capture those things when there are projects that the fund is being used to contribute towards, so that it's just a record that is more easily kept track of. And as we think about like trying to create connectivity between parcels, we don't lose sight of what those kind of broader goals were at that point of time. I think that becomes very helpful, certainly at like the select board and municipality, like governance level. Like why are we making decisions about certain assets
Even around specific projects, like.
Just in general, trying to track like, what, like, if there's a certain amount of funding that's going to, the conservation of private parcels, like the Bassages, just to pick on them a little bit, like just documenting why the decision was made about the habitat or connectivity or, habitat blocks or what's unique about it and what did that represent in that point of time. And
It would be very easy for us to like for everything that gets funded. Or I think if you can even go backwards in time, like if it had any public money at all, like the Housing and Conservation Board staff would have written up something and there would have been a board resolution and like,
right.
So I think our partners are really good at making the case for investing public money in conservation. And, the same applies to VHCV or it's going to apply to a municipal conservation fund. Is it are you returning taxpayer dollars to the community in a way that's realizable and sensible? So if you protect somebody's back 800 acres that nobody's allowed into, maybe there's some headwater forest and habitat out there, but if it also supports trails and actions and dispersed, hunting access and those sorts of things, hey, that's a little bit better. If it really supports flood resilience somehow, or allows actions and restoration activities that support, road infrastructure and flood resilience even better still. And if it's a like municipally owned thing, then that's like really checks a lot of boxes. Or a farm, which is when we, you talk about affordability, when we conserve farms, one of the goals is to hold down the value of land. And we reduce the pressure on land by about half when we put a farmland conservation easement on it. So when that happens in Calais, that's helping to like prevent runaway credit costs. So, sometimes that looks like a really privately targeted investment, but it's also has all those other benefits to it usually.
And I think communicating around what those goals are that, helps, dangle that carrot. I mean, I think with conservation, there's a fund and there are goals that are a little clearer, but certainly I've been thinking as we've been talking about all of the planning documentation that we've been trying to prepare and the planning commission is working through is like, how are we incentivizing people to be working and rowing towards common goals, even when sometimes those objectives sometimes conflict, but like we can still state what our common goals are with a little more, I think, transparency around like what our targets are. Anyway, so we'll take. Does anybody have any other questions about the budget items that are on the list that were presented?
I definitely agree that like understanding I don't know if the commission thinks that 40 to 50 is kind of where you want to be, but it would be helpful to know that that's part of the scenario, that you're looking to grow towards a certain amount. But that if you're proposing the 30K, Because you think you actually are gonna need the 30K this year.
I think
That's what I'm trying to.
Yes, the fund now like has enough money in it to support a project. We already have a couple of projects on the table.
Maybe supporting projects, because the projects are getting more expensive as time
Yeah.
goes on, and there isn't enough in there for a good sized project. At least from what I remember, going through the numbers, there's enough in there to do a very small project, if that one actually comes up. And if it doesn't come up, then we'll get money next year, and then we'll be able to do something a little larger next year.
Mhm.
But in the end, there's only a project every couple of years of any size in the current budget. But I think the land trust is gonna ask for a local contribution of 20 grand for fish. The farm there, which it, like the
Mhm.
Bassett checks a lot of boxes of trails and wetlands and it's a farm and the skiing is wonderful and all that.
Yeah.
And that reflects the change we've seen since 2020 and just the value of projects overall across the state is that things have gone, you know, even when we're we're trying to put pressure to keep it down with easements, it's getting more and more expensive to do these transactions. So I would expect that we would, you know, if we had 2 asks in a year and it was $30,000 or more, that's what we were thinking.
Mhm.
There's a little balance in there now, but we didn't want to just wipe it out. And then. So we know that it's will be somewhere up to 20,000 for the one project, and then the other one, we don't know yet what they'd ask, but I think it's probably gonna be comparable. That doesn't mean that private donors.
I was gonna say,
step
and
up.
that 20K could be
If the town said.
the
"Oh,
town saying all we can do is
Yeah, right.
fundraise for the rest.
But that means that we don't know who's, you know, that then it's less transparent when private funders are the ones that are filling in the gaps. But that's always the worry, or that's
Or it can be,
the
yeah.
idea of the sort of the municipal conservation funds is to have the public drive it and have more accountability.
Okay.
Trust is too cloak and dagger about it, but.
No.
Well, I think it's worth a little bit more conversation. That's a fairly large number, but to Barbara's point, like having a better idea of like what the number, like what the pipeline of projects are with the anticipated costs, maybe even over like the next couple of years, could be helpful, and with even like maybe some rough probability of likelihood that's going to fall in a particular fiscal year, can help inform that. I'm just wondering how we work through that conversation next in a way that is like not just the select board looking at big numbers and making estimates, but do we maybe want to take a poll to see if anybody is feeling particularly motivated to follow up on this conversation with the Conservation Commission to kind of dig into this a little bit more, to refine that number as we continue to. No.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm happy to do that, but I think the other piece would be just if you all can get back to us. Or can we now just ask for a report back on that pencils that out a bit for us?
Yeah, we can.
Would that be sufficient?
Sure. So, yeah, that's fine from our perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you can decide if you want to call us back.
Yeah, no, I think
that
that's definitely a better use of time. I'm just wondering if there needs to be more dialogue around it, we could do that. I'm just trying to be sensitive of like what our runway of dates are relative to.
If we said do something quick, then you guys would have a chance to check in about it.
Yeah, when are you setting the agenda for town meeting and like, what's the runway on all this?
Well, the warning would be set in early January.
Yeah,
The budget, we would hope to have pretty close sometime in December.
yeah, about the middle of
Possible.
December.
So the next couple of weeks is the timeline to get back to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, with like kind of the beginning of the first week of December being kind of the latest that we can have any kind of meaningful dialogue around it. But yeah, in the next couple of weeks, if you could send that over to Kari, that would be helpful.
Yeah, might be good to come to your meeting as well.
Yeah,
I'm planning on coming to the planning commission joint meeting next week, so
yeah.
that'll be a different topic.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that for now. Then we'll try to follow up with you on a little more clear instruction on on how to
Yeah,
transfer that
really helpful.
information over. Yeah, thank you.
I actually really appreciate the
Yeah,
push that this
Yeah.
represents. I think it's very positive in terms of the
Yeah.
collaboration with the planning and, you know, where we're headed and all of it. It's very positive.
It marks a big change. What I recall, and these discussions before is about land acquisition, which just, it never seemed like, how are we ever gonna do that? But conservation easements is achievable. It's just a matter of how much we can do.
yeah.
Especially the conservation.
Mhm.
One of the things that BLT tells us at BHCB a lot is that landowners call them and ask to do work and they say it's too small.
Well, that,
So-
yeah,
So getting municipalities involved to support those landowners who don't rise to the level of a BLT project that's our long-term vision.
That's helpful.
More control of this and helping the people in the community, even if you just wanna like, and I've got 2 drainages on my property where I live, maybe I can serve those with the town, like the one that you and I looked at, and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that would give you the management rights to deal with the culverts there, and it would also be good for fisheries and what have you. You know, little mini targeted easements like that is the future, I think, as well as, you know, supporting current use, which is just obviously a hugely important program in this community. We're well past 50% by 2050, if you consider current use to be part of it.
right.
And when you look at that map, it's like 80% of Calais over there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks again for the time and really, I appreciate the preamble that came with it. That's really helpful context. So thanks for putting the time into that as well. Cheers, thanks. Next up, we have the Cemetery Commission. Welcome.
If you didn't sign in, can everyone make sure they sign in too?
We're just dying to hear from you, Mike.
Don't get him started.
Sits right up for your short branch and we'll show you the mess. We're asking for more money this year.
What? Why is everybody asking for more?
I saw that.
More people die.
You see, for the painting, the Always Church Cemetery fence. If you take that away, we're asking for less money than we asked for last year. That's there. Because it's been almost 3 years since that fence was rebuilt. Gotta be painted. In a historic district, required to paint. Well, the G&D will come after us and we'll be in big trouble. We have a fairly good chance that we will be able to get cadets from Norwich University to come up here and paint that thing. Laura Daly has some connections there and she thinks that might be possible. It's a more complicated fence than the Robinson Cemetery fence. We need a fairly large number of them. They have to come up and try it, and then a few weeks later, come back and paint. And if they do that, we aren't gonna touch that $9,500. And the following fiscal year, it'll be there rolled over and we won't have to request as much. Other than that, we have special projects. There are stones in all of our cemeteries that need to be cleaned, repaired, reset. We were trying to do that on a regular basis some years ago, but it slipped under the radar. So we hope to start with the Robinson Cemetery and do all the stones in there. Otherwise, what we're asking for is pretty much the same. The sexton's contracts are all exactly the same as they have been for 2 years. So we're very happy there. And our endowment has done really well. I think we did $800 and some odd dollars this year, more than we got last year. That includes both the stock market being up and the fact that we sold, it was carried $6,100 worth of plots.
Yeah, so it's been pretty steady.
Good, yeah, people are dying at the proper rate.
Okay, right.
We're getting ready to.
So the big difference is that $9,500 to paint that fence. If we cannot get the volunteers to do it, we're gonna have to do it. Because it can't sit around much longer without getting painted.
Is
We
there,
hope that we'll get those cadets up there
Yeah, so, what's?
Is there a flood?
Emergency.
Oh, it's the 8 inches of snow that's imminent.
It's an Arctic blast. All freezing.
It's,
So
it
that's
is, it is
basically,
actually, I mean, my kids had it up in Burlington already,
Yeah.
a few hours ago.
that's basically what it is. That number is in there and we hope we don't have to use it. But if we have to use it, it's gotta get done.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of deferred maintenance in fences. That's why we had to replace 2 of them at the same time a couple of years ago. And we're trying not to do that. You remember, we got a fund established last year to save money for future fence repairs. We hope to keep that going. So,
And eventually we'll need a fence around the Hudson Cemetery. That's not a priority, but.
general information, I think, a Robinson Cemetery is nearly full. Joe said either 16 or 18 plots left to be sold in there. But in the Hudson Cemetery and scattered throughout the other cemeteries that are still open, we still have over 400 plots. So we don't need to concentrate on buying any more land for cemeteries.
Well, this is in line with the kind of dialogue that we were having last time around this and how we make a plan for maintenance costs, but I think it also dovetails into tracking what our reserve budgets are for certain things. So we have some transparency around trying to work towards getting those funded through this kind of contingency planning, so that folks understand that if we don't use it, then it gets moved over to a reserve fund that will be in place for either rebuilding a fence or painting a fence in the future, and then it doesn't become an annual.
Fences are expensive.
Fences are expensive and controversial, as it turns out.
Just a point of, I remember that there was a football team that supported the Robinson Cemetery fence
Yeah.
painting, and that was not the plan for this one.
They can't do it. There's not enough of them.
Uh,
This fence is probably close to as long as the Robinson fence, and it's more complicated. There's a board, a spacer, a board, and then the rails.
mm,
And it takes longer to paint it.
okay. Just, yeah, that's awesome, thank you.
It's just tougher.
Yep,
And then there's the gate structure as well. So,
Yeah, the football players are perfectly willing to come and do it again. But we couldn't get it done this past summer because we couldn't get enough people. But if we can get more, it's just step up.
How much of the $9,500 is just materials? Is there any, it's just paint,
Cost, labor, and material.
labor and material?
Probably ice painting. And that's just one estimate. We would hopefully get a couple others in case we have to go that direction.
Are you specifying spray or brush, or does it matter?
Brush,
Brush only,
brush and roller,
primer and paint, or just paint?
primer and paint.
Okay.
Actually, if you look at the Robinson fence closely, you could use another coat. It's okay for one.
Mhm.
And that one we can do in sections for volunteers. It's not that. It's safe for one.
Are there any other questions about the line items for the cemetery commission?
To remind everybody that cemetery is actually a separate entity and independent from the select board, so they're just informing you
Yeah.
what they intend to ask the voters for, and they're also wanting $1,000 for the reserve fund as a separate article.
Yeah, that'll be a different article. And, hope that we can put money forward and try to deal with some of this maintenance stuff and not let it build up.
Well, thank you. That's pretty straightforward from my perspective, unless anybody else has any other questions or need for clarification.
Another interesting fact is I looked at last year's budget and our last year's budget, and we're somewhere between 0.02 and 0.03% of the whole budget.
One thing that just pops into mind, given the conversation we just had about the conservation project with Bitch Farm, and your comment about Robinson Cemetery being just about full, I wonder if there's an interesting confluence of things at once that might be worth having in the dialogue. As part of-
popular cemetery, actually.
Right, and it's surrounded on three sides, I believe, by the Pitch Farm land that they're talking about conserving.
And once property is conserved,
Uh,
it's conserved.
Right.
That's the issue
so
with that.
It might be an interesting time to have that dialogue. Um,
Growing.
come up at our meetings, I mean, how much of that land would be added to the Robinson Cemetery?
right, I mean,
But do we wanna buy more land now, when we have 400 grave sites? And, green burials, composting, cremation, they're becoming more popular. I would like to think that within the 30 or 40 years, we're needing more cemeteries. Find better ways to deal with, remains.
Just giant monuments.
Long after my time.
Well, all right, I'm not gonna register any more commentary on that. But yeah, thanks, I think that, yeah, I just wish there was a little more dialogue around some of those projects.
Which one?
The conservation projects
Oh.
and the need, doesn't matter, let's leave it at that. But thank you, we'll just, I guess, prepare to incorporate some, this into the warning.
So I think at the next meeting, I'll be able to share a compilation of all this input. It won't be complete, obviously, but it'll give you a sense of where we stand with everything.
Mhm.
We have the sheriff coming next time, and then we'll continue talking about, budget, staffing model in the office post budget color. So, things are rounding out. I wanted to let you know that, we're gonna talk about open enrollment for medical insurance later in the meeting. And that has come up with the road crew, and I have one person who's expressed interest in signing up their entire family to the medical plan, and another person who wants to bring on their domestic partner. So I'm gonna build that into the budget because it's very fair, and it's gonna have a pretty significant impact, I would expect. But we'll look at that next time.
Thank you.
With our budget, since it's an article that's voted on at town meeting. There's always the opportunity for someone to say, this is too much. And ask to amend it to a little bit lower amount. I don't think that's ever happened, but. We do keep that in mind, we know that could happen.
Well, that's why we have these conversations sooner than later, and at least we as the.
We're prepared to defend our budget.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great, I look forward to passing the mic.
Thank you, Juanita.
When these columns are prepared, I mean, that's what happens, people look at the columns and look for the delta, and they're gonna ask the questions, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Juanita. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Juanita. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
All right, curb cut application.
Okay, yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. Elliot to revise the location of the cut to provide for the 425 feet of sight line.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you?
Okay.
Sorry. Do we need to say, oh, sorry, I was reading this wrong. Please carry on. I thought we missed.
Yeah, so the map in the application has been updated and the flags are in place, so.
Is it where the stone gets used to cross, or was it for that?
No,
I think it's just a little bit up from there.
Okay.
yeah, and then, so if there are two flags that are in there, I think they're the original ones that have like surveyor tape on that, and there's like one other like weathered stake in the ground. I was, cause it's not quite halfway between where the snow machine access is and where
Yeah.
that original one was
Right.
proposed, and is it still, is it where the weathered stake is? I mean, that seems more like the spot, but it doesn't seem like those other stakes have been moved at all.
Must be right on the north side of where the barn used to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
just
believe
past
it's
the
where that
barn.
older stake is, I think.
The weathered one is.
Yeah,
Just curious why they.
I know John verified that there was more than 425 feet of sideline there.
Okay. And there is a ditch there that then kind of runs into where the leaning barn was and the snow machine access was. So like assuming that they're going to be north of where the leaning barn was. Is there a plan to put in a culvert? Was that specified on the?
I don't think it's specified, but that would be required, I would think, it's, given the ditch. And we would offer them the typical arrangement is that we will, install it, they pay the cost. This is like a building family, so they may want to do it themselves.
Right. Yeah, from that perspective, I think it'd be worth that.
We can put that in
as a condition in there.
Yeah.
And that would be just I guess as approved by the road crew that,
Yeah.
by the road commissioner, and with input from the road foreman, that a culvert be installed as needed to preserve the existing ditch. But other than that, they've got line of sight and open field. The other condition that I guess I'd prefer to put on there, I know they represented the likelihood that they were going to be adding a second dwelling on there. And that this approval would assume shared use of this curb cut for any additional dwellings on the parcel.
You want to put that as a condition or just
I
let
think so.
them know that? they're
No,
gonna
I
get
think put it in there as a condition and.
Why would we wanna do that?
Well,
There's room for another curb cut down below if they wanted to put one in, right?
They wouldn't be able to put one down below
For the wetland.
because it gets close to what's delineated as a wetland. Like ideally, a curb cut for that parcel would come off of like Bliss Pond, for instance. But there's a wetland that they would have to come
Right.
over to do that. And both our zoning and town plan encourages the shared use of curb cuts when by multiple dwellings during any kind of subdivision. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be firm, but I think that it would be nice to have something in there that triggers a reevaluation of the curb cut should an additional dwelling be added and a second curb cut be requested, That's what I'm working towards. Have I sufficiently muddied all of the language around all of that?
So would it be fair to say the expectation is that this would serve a second home if we're built?
Yeah. Any
Obviously,
additional.
They can request.
Yeah.
something, but
But this would also serve as the second home, yeah.
I think in the original, that was a question and my understanding was they represented that was their intention anyway, so.
yeah, that was my understanding.
Those were the only two conditions for me. All right, can I get a motion to approve, as updated with the conditions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We've got a period of public comment. For anybody who is on from the public, doesn't look like we have a need for it, so we'll move on to the town official succession and continuity planning agenda item. Which is gonna start with the conversation around the essentials of the treasurer role, which is what we decided would spur some of this continuity planning and add some
Yeah.
structure to it.
Yeah, so, remember, we set a goal to start developing some plans for key positions, key functions. So that if the town official was suddenly, or in a planned way, unable to do their job, what's the backup? And, so we asked a handful of folks to start working on that, and this is the first response. And I chose the treasurer role because it's really well defined and it's pretty critical. So you can see there's a couple of documents in the folder, and the essential tasks one is really about just thinking through what are the tasks that would need to be done by somebody to keep, business as usual. And then who's the designated backup? What's their state of training? Is there a documented procedure? And for treasurer, it's unique because we could potentially hire Nemrick to do certain things, as we have in the past. So I have a column for that. And you can see that Tegan is designated as the backup for virtually all of those functions. And I think our thinking is that we will just start plugging away and go task by task and do whatever training, figure out a procedure document if that's needed. It'll take time, but that's the point of doing this kind of work, is getting ready. So anyway, this is sort of a first model, and I was looking for some feedback and if there's ways to improve it, or how you might suggest we roll it out to others. Because we could present this with say the zoning administrator, and they say, hey, can you think about your job relative to this?
Well, thank you for putting the time into creating this. I think this is really thoughtfully organized. The only input that, well, I guess only silly way to phrase that would be to break out the quantity of hours somehow, like in a separate column. So it can be more easily tabulated since it's already in Excel. And then as we roll into, so part of this exercise plays into long-term and medium-term thinking around how we're filling positions and staffing or compensating people for the actual time that it takes for any of these roles, whether it's zoning administrator, lister, or town staff. So I think breaking that out into a column that can be easily tabulated would be
Analyzed
beneficial.
correctly. The tricky part with that is it's so variable.
Seasonal one can be
There's these
really
cycles, and
I almost think there's like each category could have a
summation of some sort.
summary number that would give, that you wouldn't have to be thinking like 1 hour plus this, plus that, plus this, you know what I mean? I mean, I say that just so that there's not so much work done on that it sucks up all your time and energy to figure that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just trying to say like budgeting is X number of hours a year.
right. Yeah.
Rolling it up bigger, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found the format helpful, really helpful.
Good.
I just wanna ask a clarifying question about you're saying your next step would be to go through each task and try to write down what it actually entails.
Well-
Help me understand that, I'm concerned about your time.
So to give an example, I inherited a binder
Yeah.
and it had most of the tasks I need to do and the basics how to do them. Some of them are a little outdated and some of them don't exist. So I'm going through and I'm trying to, because Judy did it. So
Yeah,
that was,
so
and
update it.
that was what I go through.
Yeah.
So I have a binder, but most of my work is so responsive
Mm-hmm.
that to say, oh, well, every week I spend this many hours on this, is I never know what email, it's more of the town administrator's job. As far as from week to week, it varies so dramatically, and then every once in a while you get a learning problem that takes up a lot more time than you anticipated.
Right.
So I think this will look different for everybody, and I think with jobs like town administrator and assistant clerk and clerk, it can fill however many hours you want it to go. Barbara has proven, it can fill however many hours you wanna give to it, and so that part I anticipate as being tricky. I think it'd be really challenging for me to put together what Kari has. There are certain things I have to do every year, that take a small amount of time, like your half hour, hour a year things, but there are so many things that are not quantifiable this way.
Right.
So my thought on that would be like thinking about the state of training. If it's no training at all, I wanna make sure Tegan knows what these words mean, like what have a basic concept, and then is there a website?
Right.
Is there a password? You know, it's just some real basics at least.
Okay.
There are tasks that like payroll that Tegan's done quite a bit of, and there might just be some refresher questions, and then everything in between, I think.
So when you're already with you that, so you have those already written out in a document, that I know where it is and how to follow it.
Yeah.
Those may not be there.
Yeah.
It just gave me pause that you might be going over the line.
And I think if we spent a half an hour on this a week for a period of time, I think we could make some really good progress, and I'd be willing to budget that kind of time.
And recognizing that each, as you're saying, each position won't necessarily go as deep as this or be able to go as deep as this. Yeah, okay, thank you. I think I do like the format, and I especially like it twinned with the sort of month to month, sort of, these are, I mean, that to me is essential, is the flow.
Yeah, and seeing where there's like having some continuity between the different positions so that you can see where there's a lot of overlap in demands.
Right,
for
like
staff,
everyone's
like,
flat out.
everyone's flat out in October, or like in preparation for town meeting, and not just,
January, February, or
Yeah.
the two crunch times.
Mhm.
So I think complementing this with like not a Gantt chart, but like an annual calendar that
Yes.
basically shows the
Yeah,
block of
absolutely.
time.
Basic one.
Yeah.
It doesn't have those kind of time details, but it does have here are the tasks that need to happen month to month.
Mhm.
Kari, I don't know if you looked at that. I know I have a version Jeremy sort of tweaked on my
I
computer.
don't know if I've seen that. I've seen it for the town report, like that detailed.
Yeah,
task
it's
list.
when it's month to month, here are like the half dozen things that we really ought to do, and it's.
Isn't that incorporated in our calendar?
It,
I don't know. But it runs the gamut from things like, this is when we used to have the volunteer appreciations, that tells you how old the document is.
Mm.
This is when dog registrations are due to, this is when the tax payment, like, just those big ticket items across.
I would just assign some task numbers to each of those, so when you put them in a book, you can put them in task order to
Oh,
be
okay,
found easier
Yep,
possibly.
yep. I like that.
TDB,
Me,
Tegan,
like,
Tegan Dykeman Brown,
oh, okay.
how dare
to determine B.
yeah.
I thought it was three different people. I'm going, okay, because I see TT down here.
you? To determine Bill, those are all of your follow-up items.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh, boy.
I think that's really, really great start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so part of what we wanted to kind of dovetail this conversation into is also so kind of an update on Kari's proposal for compensation review and how that overlaps with thoughts on future state planning for the staffing. So this is all kind of, rowing in that same direction. There's a lot of collaborative dialogue between Barbara Teagan and Kari around defining what those roles are, what the hours are, what the responsibilities are. So premature probably to get into too much detail now, but we wanted to just like earmark that conversation as one that's developing, so that when we do look at a compensation proposal from Kari, and then further evaluate the one that is being proposed by Teagan for the roles that we currently have. It's in the context of what that future state staffing is, and a fair representation of what everybody's doing. I think it's really important to note that we've got a really great, strong team, and they deserve to be compensated for the work that they're doing for the town. And it's important for the town to realize the cost associated with having that level of talent and service on the ranks or within the ranks. So anyway, that's my commentary on that. Kari, I don't know if you want to add any more other than that at this point, but
well, I do think that this would kind of serve, as we're thinking about this, the position that we use to replace what Barbara does. And what it could be to start out and what it could grow into. I think it's almost like a development tool, you know, in some ways. That's how I'm thinking about it. Like, here are the tasks that we can plan on another person taking on, in addition to Teagan, you know, as part of the mix as well. So it's getting organized.
The other thing we have talked about a little bit is, do we want, in an ideal world, like if we're wish listing here, is this a person who helps with grants for non-highway grants or for highway grants? As Toby eventually phases out one day, like, are these things we want? Because most grants folks, if you can get a good one, can cover their salaries and then some by doing whatever they do for the town. So that might be a thing. If we wanted someone to take on the town hall and leadership of managing the town hall, that's another thing we could add. You know, we go back and forth between, we could get by fine with someone to answer the phones and arrange select board meetings and do, you know, a small portion of what Barbara does. Kari and I would be fine. We could get done what we needed to get done. And then we wouldn't have to pay benefits for someone. But what could really improve the town, improve what you guys are doing, improve what we are doing, what, you know, how far along do we want to push that? So those are kind of the conversations we've been having. Well,
and to that point, you know, that plays into the conversations that we've been having over the last couple of years. And it's just like, we have individuals who have very strong skills and are assets to our community and for long-term planning. And how do we create the headroom, mental capacity really to be continuing to like focus on that stuff? You know, to Teagan's point, you know, there's no doubt that the staff with their competency would be able to cover that and save money. But what kind of opportunity cost are we absorbing by asking folks to cover too many responsibilities? So we just wanted to serve up that conversation now so that folks are starting to think about that. If we need to have any dialogue about how we'd like to see that structured, we can certainly schedule time for the select board to work through that dialogue a little bit if people have very specific opinions, but yeah.
Specifically talk about on the 24th?
Yeah, on the 24th. Yeah. So start working on your opinions if you haven't already. Otherwise, I'm gonna just dominate it with mine, as I usually do, right?
Jeez.
Come on. Give up. Okay. Are we feeling good about that particular item? Move on to the next town report? No?
No,
What?
it's fine.
What?
I just, I assume, I'm gonna say something I assumed already, but like, this kind of task list or giant, areas of work and specificity doesn't already exist with like the LCT or? Ha ha ha.
They have handbooks.
There's a handbook, yeah.
That tells us statutorily what we are required to do.
Right.
It doesn't give you a good idea of what a treasurer
So
of
this is all gonna go back to them as a useful tool for them, I feel like, or for other communities that.
But it's it varies so much from town to town.
Yeah.
Each one has been so configured, given, whether you have FEMA things going on, whether you have
Right.
police, there are so many different factors.
Okay.
There are definitely places where in my binder, I do reference like, see the Secretary of State's elections notebook for more information, or see the
Okay.
VLCT.
Yeah.
So I know I have done that. I don't know if you've looked at the treasurer handbook for that side of things.
Yeah, it's pretty general. There actually are, and Nemrick has detailed procedures for many of their, applications.
Right.
But you can see on this list, there's really a wide variety of things. And
Yes.
there are some things that only get done once a year at a very specific time. And
Right.
and it's probably gonna be somewhat unique to Calais, so like how you go about
Okay.
doing that.
Okay, and then at some point, I just wanted to, the task list and the calendar. One assumes that as you're going through this, it's surfacing things like, oh, wait a minute, is that covered on the job description, right? So they'll be able to look back at that.
Sure, yeah,
Okay,
we intend to bring job descriptions next time.
great.
With, what did we say? I can't remember. I think salary ranges is another thing that you asked for. I'll look at my notes, but there was a
We
few
talked a little
things
bit
that
about that would be helpful.
have some conversation with for the two of us leading up to eventually having a job description for the new position.
Because Barbara has a detailed list of what she does, that she worked on pretty diligently during the spring, divided by sections.
Okay.
So that's a helpful thing, and some of those things I have taken on as she has cut back on hours. Some things have changed a little bit, but that's still a pretty good list for what she has typically done in the past.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, I think so. Town report planning.
Yep, so it's already time, start thinking about the report. So last year's, I think, was pretty successful, the select board, or the report overall, but the select board portion of it specifically. And Christie drafted it, and it included, the highlights from the past year, went through the budget a bit and talked about ongoing projects. And then there were tributes to Eva, Morris, and Winchester, so things to keep in mind. I would assume we will want to do something for Barbara this year. Christie's willing to draft it again. She just said, give me a due date. So, I was thinking we could tell her, late December, and then you guys could talk about the draft in early January. And you probably would have at least one meeting, if not two, to talk about it. Or you could ask her to have it for the second meeting in December, I suppose. You look at initial draft then, it just depends.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
December 15th.
Yeah, December 15th.
Okay.
Just have a draft for then, and then we can just have dialogue around
Yeah,
that.
obviously there's time to make adjustments.
Yeah.
And that same sort of topics, highlights of the year, budget and ongoing.
Ongoing,
Looking
yeah.
ahead. Yeah. Great.
Tributes. Reports, Tegan.
The election, was great, very smooth, everything was good, people were lovely as always, I appreciate Calais voters, there was only one grouchy voter who went to the elementary school after it was dark. And did not find voting there, and then went to the town hall and found it dark, and even though we had signs saying, and I had. Anyway, there was only one grouchy. So that went well, the reappraisal continues to move along, people email us occasional questions and clarifying things, so more and more people are definitely getting reassessed and questions are starting, but I know that there's not really anything that's going to change. I don't know when Nemrick is planning to be done with all the properties. They were giving us dates in the spring, so I don't have a whole lot of information for people. They're learning that a reassessment just means they've looked at your house and they've evaluated everything, but you're not gonna have a new number for your house until the spring, like a new assessed value. But people are starting to get scared and worrying about taxes going up because assessed values have gone up, and we continue to explain that that's not how the math works. But it is what it is. We ordered Eva's plaque. Barbara has cleared a space in the office and is starting to plan it, and so now we know what size plaque we need, and so we have ordered the plaque. Sorry that took a lot for that, it's on the way. I have been looking at the fire district stuff still, and the general consensus seems to be that the fire district need to become a water commission under the select board as part of the town to get a lot of these benefits that we had talked about. I don't know if the fire district wants to do that. They're really appreciate their autonomy and the history that they have, and I don't know if they want to move forward with that, so I haven't pushed them. We talk about it every once in a while, but that's not, I don't know if that's something they really want to do. So we'll see how that goes.
That would be a townwide vote to make.
I haven't talked to the attorney, so the only person I haven't talked to really to see what logistics would be is talk to the town attorney to really see how it works. But yeah, it would probably be a townwide vote, and it'd be a big change.
Thanks, Tegan.
So we had a productive meeting with Kyle Bellavance and his team last
Yeah.
week. So remember, we had an overage on the invoice of over $35,000. And so we needed to have a conversation about how to handle that. They were very open to the points that we made, and we all agreed that learning experience. And then their proposal is to reduce that overage to $12,709.50, which is essentially the wholesale cost of the material that they put into the road bed. So that's pretty good outcome from my perspective.
Yeah, I was very happy to see that email.
Yeah, that was a great email, and glad you guys were able to work through that, and thanks to you and Toby for kind of meeting on them on that, and glad we were able to get there. Also really helpful to have that perspective from the engineer who acknowledged the need, and
Yes, there's a benefit to the town, this additional expense. So.
I know Toby had mentioned that, one of the issues with this particular grant is that it was so old and we were under the gun to get it done. But it lacked a certain amount of kind of standard detail and contract that you would otherwise be put in. So he was talking about trying to work on standardizing what our contracts look like when we engage in a
And having
relationship
the
like
engineer
that,
on
and
site.
having the engineer,
Yeah.
establishing a procedure for all of that up front, which
That
would
would've-
be.
Yeah, that we would have saved money after doing that in the long run.
Yeah.
So anyway, if this is acceptable, what I'd like to do is send out the payment this week, because they've been waiting, and then bring a warrant to you for next time.
Right.
Does that seem
I think
reasonable?
so, yeah.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
Okay, great. Other topics, the county road shoulder work got done. So I guess they knocked that out on Friday. I'm surprised that happened, but it's looking good. There's been a change in leadership at the East Montpelier Fire Department. So there's a new chief and president, and they're also hiring for their EMT supervisor. Person does training and scheduling and things like that. So
who's a person there too, or?
I don't know, and that's why Jordan and I are gonna meet with the new folks, plus the select board chair and town administrator in East Montpelier.
Spend a
Next
lot of money
Monday,
with them.
just to check in, see what's going on, how they're doing and all that. And then Jordan and I also, and hoping Bill could come, gonna meet with the Shermans and Aaron Fuller at the Chapintown Forest this Saturday. We'll talk about the boundary issue.
Karen, have you found out any more about the house for sale?
No,
The Sherman's property is good.
Zillow lists that property as under contract.
which no one has told us about, we just know about from the internet.
Which house, where?
The Shermans.
That's,
Oh,
that's, as part of this. The folks that were just here,
Yeah.
didn't mention that,
I see.
Yeah, he doesn't mention
so
that.
that's why.
Mhm.
So anyway, we'll report back after Saturday.
Yes.
Mhm.
Any questions?
Nice day on Saturday.
We move on to the truck.
Move
plow
on to the truck
assembly.
plow conversation, yeah.
Okay, so the crew, John specifically, but the crew in general has been lobbying to make a change to the plow system that we're getting for the new truck. This is the truck that we purchased last spring or late winter
Thanks, Tegan.
and have been waiting for the plow. And the truck's sitting at Charlie Boys up in Charlevoix, up in Milton, waiting for a Viking plow that's been 2 years in the pipeline, is supposed to be installed in January. Meanwhile, the crew is strongly in favor of not getting the Viking, but going with an Everest system. All of our trucks have Everest plows except for the truck that John drives, which is a Viking, and they showed me the difference. Just the assembly, it attaches to the truck about 6 inches higher, which results in a steeper angle down to the road. And where it hits the road is just much sharper. So that it's when conditions are soft or not even, they don't have to be particularly soft, there's more digging that's happening. And he's putting on the mud blades, but he's already gone through a couple sets in a season and a half. The other issue is that the steel is not as high quality, so parts have been wearing out. He showed me holes that, from the chains pulling up that have been wearing out, and you can just tell, you have to be an expert to tell that the steel is thinner. So I bring this to you, it would be a little over $13,000 in additional expense. I don't know, I haven't spoken with Charlevoix or Viking about making this change. I wanted to start here. Actually, I started with a financing company. They don't care. They're fine, where they need to send the payment. But if you said it was okay, in theory, I would then go and talk to Charlie Boyce and Viking and try to make the change.
Does Viking have any of our money yet?
I'm sorry?
Does Viking have any of our money yet?
No, they do not.
Okay.
The balance of our loan is sitting in a cash account, waiting to be requisitioned until, the pod is actually installed. We have paid for the truck.
Yep, I might know about that, yes.
Even though
So
not
is
using-
there any, the only concern I have with this is that if somehow this sets the timing back even further.
It would set the timing back even further, so instead of January, it would be 4 to 6 months,
Right.
which is,
They think is,
which they think is worth it.
They think-
That's an indicator of how strongly they feel about these
Yeah.
plows.
And also that means it's not this season, right? I
Right,
mean,
right,
essentially,
right.
they don't have access to it this season.
And we're okay this season without that truck?
Yeah, I mean, we have a spare
Yeah.
and, we have 4 trucks plus a spare. Right, because they drive the F600 part of it as well, so. Yeah,
I'm okay with. You looking?
Yeah, I think, but for me, Carter's already heard this, but in our agenda planning meeting, but I think that the risks of Viking getting upset, my guess is if their demand is that significant, that there's probably something else that can get, bumped up the line and receive our plow. And it's
Yeah.
more important, I think, that we take the advice of the road crew and their lived experience with the different assemblies and try to get something of of better value. I'm kind of curious whether or not, if we were able to make a commitment to a switch, whether or not the Everest folks would be willing to move on their price a little bit to make it easier for us to make a switch. I mean, that's that's like a.
Could see how that develops, or get it faster than.
Get it, yeah, faster. I mean, that's really only a 10% discount, so, right, it's like 100 and. How much is the final assembly in total? It's like $180,000.
No,
$100,000.
I don't think it's that much. I think it's
$80,000.
113 or 123 versus 110.
Yeah, so at 10% discount, that's, not outrageous. Maybe they're motivated at the end of the year to try to lock in a commitment, even if it is extra time.
Yeah,
They'll make it
I can ask. We get to that point.
I think that sounds like consensus then.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good news.
All right, next agenda item is highway department labor negotiation update. And the potential action items are all after the proposed executive session, so. I wonder if we would, if folks would be open to maybe just going through some of the administrative action items before we go into executive session, just so that they're recorded, and then that kind of eases the burden of note taking and recording afterwards. That makes sense? All right. So the approval of the minutes is the first one we'll take up then, from October 27th select board meeting. Those are posted to the shared drivers. Everybody able to review those. Or any comments or concerns? Can I get a motion to approve the October 27th select board meeting minutes?
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye.
I was not there, so I'm abstaining.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Vote to approve the board orders, also posted to the select board folder. If everyone's had the opportunity to review those. So any commentary or questions on those?
What was the? Excuse me.
Let me think. Well, it's on here.
I can look it up.
I didn't hear.
But right to it, it's great. Property line boundary. But I prepared this to come out of the conservation fund.
Okay.
Because that's what this is for
The
the
town
Bliss Town Forest
Okay.
survey.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Um,
No more questions.
can I get a motion to approve and sign the board orders as posted to the shared drive?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. And approve the scheduling. Kari, do we need to have an action item to approve the payment for Bellavance for the 12,700?
Sure,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
So we'll
You
just
done
do
that?
that as a separate item from the board orders, but can I have a motion to approve the payment of Bellavance Land Works for a total of $12,709.50 as previously discussed, and to be, I guess, signed off on with the next meeting's board orders. This is just a preliminary approval.
It's out of order typically to mail the payment before, but as
Yeah.
long as you approve it, that's fine.
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
And then the meeting idea was that, we just realized that because you pushed up your, second December meeting to the 15th. There's gonna be a 4-week gap if we wait until the 12th, and that can be a tricky time of year to, well, 4 weeks is just a long time.
Mhm.
So, you know, if folks are available, you might wanna schedule the 5th. And then if you don't need the 12th, then you could always cancel that, but I'm guessing you'll probably want the 5th. If you're available.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Agreed, I'm available.
Or the 12th could be a very brief meeting, just focused on like the warning and that kind of.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would be hesitant to take it away
Right.
if it's already on the calendar. But to add the other one.
Yeah, you can make that call later,
So is everybody in favor? Tentatively kind of scheduling a special meeting for the 5th?
Okay,
Do
great.
that. And the 2026 employee medical insurance plan and HRA levels, do you want to have a good conversation about that, or is that?
Either way, I thought that
looped
flowed
into
from the labor contract, but at this point, I think it's safe to say we're
the- So separate-
pointing in a direction
Yeah,
on the plan, so you can go ahead and do that right now.
okay. So we have to approve,
I think it's good form, so really the options are, given what our contract says, and the contract's still in effect in the first half of 2026. That we will provide the standard gold plan, whether that's MVP or Blue Cross, we get to decide, and I think it's a no-brainer that we would go stick with MVP at a 1.1% premium increase. So that's one part of it, and then we have this health reimbursement arrangement. And we get to decide how much the current level current contract specifies an amount, I don't remember what it is, but we're well above that. The proposed renewal of the contract says at least the deductibles, so we're well above that as well. However, if you wanted to keep pace with the changes to the deductibles and the max out of pocket that MVP is creating in next year's plan, we would bump it up $100 on the HRA, just to keep in mind. Not everybody uses the full amount, and so if they don't, the town keeps the savings, right, as opposed to an HSA in which the employee keeps the savings. That makes sense.
I guess I just didn't, I don't know what I don't have something to compare it to in terms of like, what does that all add up to? Is it significant? To add the
Adding
extra.
$100, well, there are currently 6 positions that are eligible for medical insurance benefits, so the maximum exposure would be an additional $600.
Okay, that's what yeah,
That's per year, okay.
But my guess would be closer to 100 or 200,
yeah, okay,
or even 0.
okay, thank you.
so can I get a motion then to approve the MVP gold select plan, a standard gold plan for I guess the addition of the two employees. Do we need to specify
No, just
the HRA?
Just the benefit that we're offering,
Okay.
starting in January.
Right.
Starting in January, right,
It's a calendar year, yeah, so
Right.
it actually affects this year's budget.
right.
Yeah. So can I get a motion to approve the increase of the HRA benefit?
Is this one motion?
2 motions.
2 motions? You want to do 2? We can do
I
2.
was just saying how crafty your language is.
I think I've demonstrated enough tonight that that language is inadequate. So. anybody else wants
It
to,
indicates it's gonna be one.
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I can't think right now with a,
You could,
separate
Which we
motions.
just paragraph,
select
right?
the 2026. All right, you could select the MVP standard gold plan for calendar 2026 with an HR level of $2,850 for single, $5,700 for two or more individuals.
So moved.
Perfect.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
The replay will help me.
All right, so that leaves an executive session, and happy to dismiss Orca and Shayna.
Yes.
And we will
Or he just-
Oh,
Okay.
provide you with an update on the ins and outs of executive session as well as any actions afterwards.
So entering the executive session at go far.
Yeah, so we need to take a motion to enter into executive session under one BSA 313(1)B associated with labor relations agreements with employees. And this is going to be related to reviewing and receiving an update on the status of our current collective bargaining negotiations with the highway department.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.